much catch up and get the stream started. These weeks are flying by. I can't believe we're up to episode 7 of the CodeZone already. It really does not seem like 7 weeks since we started doing this. And do you know, when you think about it, for what amounts to about an hour a week, including a load of distraction from the chat and a lot of rambling, we're not doing so bad. So let's make sure some people are turning up. Okay, we've got a standard int. Apostolisk, hello. Morris, hello. Jacob, hello. Plush Amazoni. Yeah, I remember saying that one last week. That was a bit difficult. Hello. Well, this week I thought what we would do is, it says in the title actually, it says Stars and Dust. And, well, let's have a recap of where we got up to, I think, first. We ended up creating this sort of nice, smooth-looking universe with a big, bright sun in the middle, and we were donated by Mycon a little craft in the middle. And we hacked together some sort of craft control, and it was rubbish. It really was. It was barely flyable, and we might come back to that later today. One of the odd things is the craft just keeps accelerating. We can see here it goes faster and faster and faster. Eventually, too fast that you can't do anything sensible. You literally can't slow down. You can't steer it. It's just all wrong. So we'll come back to that. It was a terrible implementation. We need to rethink it. Let's just come out of the tab. That's what I wanted to go into manual cam mode. But one of the things that the craft sort of highlighted is that it's actually very difficult to tell where you're going and what you're doing in space. So I'm going to address that. Right, lots of people catching up now. So Danny Cron, hello. Alex, hello. Magetsub, hello. And Channel Mouse, hello. Yes, evening. It's much lighter now. Our clocks have changed, I think, since the last one of these that we did. So outside, it's very bright. It's natural daylight that's illuminating my visage. Oh, something's happening. What's going on? Oh, we've got some gifted subs. Thank you very much, Standard Int. Magetsu will never live that down. Right. Yes, it is CodeZone time. Hello, Speedy. Hello, I have 13 digits. Yes, it's time to just get on with doing some code. So one of the things I wanted to implement today was, well, the space background is very empty. Hopefully that'll stop soon, I think. Frederick Lazarus, hello. First time watching a stream. What are we coding? Right. Well, this is the 7th episode of Space Thing, and the plan is, well, we don't know. There's no plan. We just make it up as we go along, and we see what we're generating. But so far, we have a model solar system with some lit planets, and the planets can have satellites, and the satellites can have satellites too. Oh, thank you, Morris. And we looked at doing nice, interesting textures on the sun. And we've got sunspots that sort of move around. I think everything's moving very slowly at the moment. We deliberately slowed down time, didn't we, in our universe at the end of the last episode. And somewhere now, although it's definitely gone, it's out there in the deep space somewhere, there's a ship floating around. It's not coming back. But as the ship flies around, too, I'll restart that. As the ship is flying around, it's actually very difficult to see what's going on. Let me zoom in. So we have a ship here, and it's F1 to capture it. So I just want to sort of get the ship moving ever so slightly. There we go. Whoa, follow. There we go. But when you get out into the sort of the darkness of space, you can't really tell whether you're moving or not. Although with this one, because it just continuously accelerates, I'm trying to add dampening. See that's strange, right? That shouldn't happen. That's definitely broken. When you've got interesting textures in the background, you get movement, but now we don't know, right? We've put in this gradient to give us this sort of large-scale impression, but if you're at this level, you've no idea really what's going on. So that's what we want to try and do something about, and I think to do that I need to put some stars in the background. Yeah, Space Thing is the official title. Ericsson is here. Hidden Asbestos is back. That's all sorted now, thank you. Uncoder, yes. Yeah, occasionally I do stream. It's nothing like the YouTube channel. It's total chaos. Now, to put stars in is quite a tricky thing, because the first thing you might think to do is, well, you just draw lots of random dots everywhere. Oh, something's gone ping. Leon Krell, thank you very much for the subscription there. No, much appreciated. The subscriptions on Twitch are appreciated, certainly. You'll have a limited time to earn exclusive. Twitch pops up with all the things. They've basically gamified streaming, of all things. So every time something happens, there's all sorts of notifications and pop-ups, which I'm totally unaware of what they mean. It's much easier to stream on Twitch than YouTube. I will say that, though. Sorry, YouTube. And of course, to those that have just joined and haven't watched this before, everything we're doing here is done in the Pixel game engine. Anyway, I was saying stars, right, so it would be very tempting to just sort of draw white dots everywhere. But of course, when we're looking at the spatial scales of our universe, how many white dots do we draw? Well, if we're at this scale and we draw 100, then when we're at this sort of zoomed in scale, if I just release the camera there, when we're here, you're never going to see anything, right? The actual chances of landing on a star in your field of view is incredibly remote. So then you're tempted to think, well, let's add millions of stars. So, okay, we add millions and millions of stars, but then I've got to draw them all or somehow spatially sort them out. And that seems like effort too. So I'm going to steal some code that I created from the procedurally generated universe video, where I'm going to take the coordinate of the universe and use that to seed a pseudo-random number generator. And that will tell me if a star exists in that location. At least that's the plan. Yeah, we'll come back to the ship later on, I think. Right, so yes, space dust. Now that's the second side of this. So stars are sort of some fixed things in the background. But even so, even if we put in billions and billions of stars, the scale of our universe is so huge, we'll have lots of empty space. So to give the illusion of movement, you do want some sort of high-speed dust moving around. And we might look at that today. I'm thinking that's actually going to be quite a tricky one to implement because the dust varies based on the spatial scale that you're at. Excuse me for the cough. It is back a little bit this week. Why don't you use Vim? Because this is what 2021 now we're in, and I did start coding sometime in the 80s, but we've moved on a little bit in 40 years. Space itself looks so unreal. We have to add filters to it. Well, that's the problem. Space looks really boring. There's nothing in it. So, I think... Oh, hang on. We've got something else going on. Hannaboo just subscribed via Twitch. Thank you very much, Hannaboo. Right, so... let's start by trying to somehow think about how do we generate this seed for the random number generator. And I'm going to do it because we know that our universe is sort of one big floating point pond. But we could, in theory, break that down into a grid. We could have sectors or cells in this grid, and those cells have an integer coordinate. And we can put that grid on top of the universe as we've got it now. So let's just experiment with that. Let's try that here. Actually, we want to do this. We'll draw, just for now, we'll draw a grid on top of everything else that we're drawing. So here we're drawing the cosmic background loveliness. Here we're drawing the solar system. And what was this one? This was the ship that we hacked in at the end of last week. Well, let's hack in something else. So if I've got something that's a sector, a cell size, and I'm just going to, for now, set that to 1 by 1. One of the things that this is going to make us need to revisit, and I might do this offline because it won't be very interesting, is actually adjusting the scales of our universe to be something sensible. Changing the type from floating point to doubles and that sort of thing, and just doing a general bit of tidying up of the code. I think that's necessary. I don't think I'm going to do that on stream because it's not very interesting watching a guy refactor code. So really right now we're just using this as a blank canvas and throwing all of our ideas at the screen and seeing what happens. Right, yes, have I triggered people about the Vim stuff? That's okay. I don't mind. I don't mind triggering people. Now, one of the nice things that we've got about our transformed view is we can actually get the coordinates of the view that's visible on our screen at any one time. They're built-in functions, and they're quite useful when you're working with tiles. Oh, it's saying, you've received a level 2 hype train emote. I'll click this share button. What does that mean? I clicked it. Did anything happen? I don't know. Emotes are being delivered to supporters. I have no idea what these things are. Oh, one of them's like arrows and bows and arrows and things. Yeah, it's all very, very confusing. No idea. Right, so I want to get the top left and the bottom right of our visible universe. So let's try that. We'll just cache these in. So if I create more 2D vector types, so v top left, and we'll call, yes, so what we want to do is call tv.get world top left. See, that's cool, right? It exists as a thing. Okay, let's just see how this works first before we start hacking things together. So now we'll also get the bottom right. Get world bottom right. So that will give me 2 coordinates that represent the very top left of our viewable area and the bottom right viewable area. So in principle, I can work out how many sectors I've got by subtracting those 2. But sectors are going to be sort of an integer thing. So let's use an integer vector type here. That might come back to haunt us, we'll find out. And we can do v bottom right minus v top left. And that will give us the number of tiles visible on the screen that are 1 by 1 in our scaled universe. Remember, our planets were sort of 5 or 10 diameter planets, and the sun was something like 100 diameter. So hopefully what we should see when we start to draw these out is like a grid overlaid, which kind of corresponds to the size of the things in our universe. So now I've got my sectors, and I know how many are in each axis. I should draw them as rectangles. OLC vi2d v sector. And we'll just put some for loops in. For v sector dot y equals well, we're always going to go from the top left to the bottom right, but I'm going to iterate through them like this because I'm going to draw them relative on the screen. So start that at 0. V sector dot y is less than or equal to our v sectors dot y. And v sector, getting a lot of v sector stuff going on here, aren't we? Dot y plus plus. And we'll do exactly the same for x. So we're just going to iterate through all of this this matrix. Change these over. Quick glance at the chat. How to Twitch by JeveDix9. Yes, not the right guy to be giving this. But there are reasons to use. Oh, we're not talking about Rust, are we? Why have we got Rust going on? This is not a Rust chat. Right, so we've got our sectors. Let's draw them. So tv.draw rect. So just going to draw it on top of everything. We know that it's v sector. And we know that the size of our thing is going to be our v sector size. But I do need to offset that by our top left, I think. Right, let's just see what happens there. Okay, well, our screen's gone very bright and our frame rate has completely dropped out, which is telling me that actually it's kind of doing what we want it to do. So as we zoom in, there we go. We've got all of our individual sectors. It was just drawing a lot of them. Sorry, I do apologise for the cough today. I've got my water just in case. So let's go and have a look at our planet Earth. And we've put this nice grid on top. Now, interestingly, what we can see is that actually it doesn't cover the whole boundary. See, we've got a gap up there. This is quite common when we've drawn grids in the past. That's very nice. So all I'm going to do to make sure that we draw those additional cells is I'm going to call on the top left, I'm going to use the floor function. And on the bottom right, I'm going to use the seal function. So that just gives us sort of an extra boundary of cells. We might not always see them, but they are there. Why have you not changed colour? I don't know. Don't know why that's not changed colour. So now, if we zoom in, any scale, it kind of looks okay. Yeah, good. Let's find the planet. Where's the planet? I'm sure the Twitch compression is loving that. There we go. So we've broken up our universe into sort of viewable sectors. So now we can do things per sector, potentially. You have the banhammer ready. Good, good, good. Okay. So what are we going to do in these sectors? Well, in principle, we could use the coordinate of the sector to seed our random number generator and tell us whether or not to draw some stars there. So let's do that. In fact, I'm going to steal the code for the random number generator. I need to get that first, don't I? So let's open up a window. I'm just going to pop over to the GitHub. There we go. And Pixel Game Engine, videos. The universe is what we're after, ProcGen universe. Because in here, I created some utility functions, which I'm going to steal. There they are. Right, I'm just going to pull that off screen so I can see what I'm doing. But I really am just going to take these functions absolutely as they are. So copy. I'll zoom out just a tad on here so I can see where I'm going. We might add these to a utilities file later on, but for now we'll just splat them in there. There we go. And we need an R&D function, which is the sort of the magic bit. Now, if you haven't seen this video, yes, we've just pulled in loads of cryptic looking code. This is what I thought was a nice statistically sort of even, fair random number generator. It's also very fast, and that's quite an important thing here because we're going to be generating lots of random numbers. Can't you... Oh, hang on. I'm reading a comment from Ericsson here. Can't you just shove that into a for loop as for A equals top left, for A equals bottom right? And the loop will automatically use the right sector count and offsets and such. No, because it's in 2 axes. So no, we can't do that. Although usually Ericsson is right and I'm wrong. So yes, this is code we've used in the procedural generation video. I'm just going to use it as is. Now it uses doubles and things, so we're going to have all sorts of sort of errors being thrown at us about casting. But this is, at the moment, we're just hacking things together. And I think, yes, as I mentioned before, off stream, I'll sort of tidy this up a little bit, I think. So now that we've got a particular sector, we can create a seed for a random number generator for that sector. So let's do that. The seeds are, I think they were 32 bits. In fact, the seed was just nprocgen, wasn't it? If I remember correctly. Correct. That's how we seed a particular thing. And we're going to use the x and y values here, and we're going to use the bottom 16 bits of each, just to create sort of a hash, a very quick and dirty hash. So vsector.y ended with the bottom 16 bits, and I'm going to shift all of that up 16 bits, and then I'm going to OR that with vsector.x and the bottom 16 bits of that. Oh, there we go. Another F there, just in case, for good luck. So that's created, that's combined our x and y coordinates into generating something that the procedural generator can then use. we've got our rectangle. Now we can choose to draw some stars. How many stars we need to draw is a little bit undetermined, but let's pick a small number to begin with. Int n equals 0, n is less than 10, n plus plus. And what I will do is draw some random numbers for a star's coordinate. So OLC VF2D V star excuse me, equals random double, oddly, and we'll just pick them between 0 and 1. So 0 and 1. And we're doing that for both the x and y, aren't we? It's going to complain at me about these things. So I'll cast that too. Right, so I've created a random x and y. It's not start, it's star, and I just want to draw that now relative to our coordinate system here, relative to the sector. So tv.draw. I'm just going to draw a point. V star. Do I need to? Yes, I do need V star plus V sector. Now, V sector is currently integer type, so we'll see what happens there. That's going to draw 10 stars. Do I need my? Yes, I do need my and plus top left, don't I? V top left. Right, let's just see what happens. Okay. I reckon to begin with it's going to grind to a halt because we're so zoomed out. It's going to be too busy doing all of this generation and drawing that we'll not see any frame rate at all. Well, it's not too bad. I mean, it's like 1 or 2 frames a second. So let me just scroll that over and attempt to zoom in a bit, because as I zoom in, the frame rate will improve. Well, we're certainly getting stars drawn per sector. But the problem is, it's very difficult to see on the Twitch stream perhaps, but we've made a mistake here, because when I've created my seed is only using the V sector directly. So that's always going to be the same for every cell on the screen. I actually need to use the sector plus the current location. Our current top left coordinate. Yes. So let's do it that way. Whilst that's compiling, I will chat up to the... I'll chat up? Huh? Who am I chatting up? I don't know. I'll look at the chat, is what I meant to say. You don't know if you'll ever have a use of bit shifting. Bit shifting is really useful stuff, Alex. Definitely worth having a bit of a practice for. Phil Boswell. Yep, well, nobody noticed you sneaking in there, but isn't that just an integer hashing function? Yes, it is. Very trivial one. Right, so where am I up to? Tab, zoom in. So now, hopefully, yes, that's good. Now, what we can see is that the stars per sector are sort of randomly generated, but they're consistent in space. So let's go and have a look around at the planet. I've lost my planet. There it is, there's the planet. So now we can see stars. Now I don't know if you can see those on the Twitch stream, so do somebody shout out if we can or we can't. We can see, good, because what this really means is that these stars are consistent. And we've not had to store them anywhere, right? We've just sort of generated them as and when we've needed them, depending on our sort of where we are in space. So that's a nice cheap way of generating some stars. And we're only generating the stars we can see as well. The problem is, as we zoom out, we're seeing billions and billions and billions of stars. So I think for now, first thing we'll try is not drawing the rectangles. We'll give that a go. Zoom in a bit, press the tab key to let the camera right. Okay, so if there were any particular patterns in the sky, those patterns actually remain there. Right? We don't need to store it anywhere. So people could go back to parts of the galaxy that they're familiar with, and they'll recognise the constellations. We could vary this up a little bit by also choosing things such as different star sizes and different colours. I think it's a bit noisy. Yeah, at that scale, I think it is probably a bit noisy. And we'll address that in a minute, because I think what we'll do is look at how many sectors we're drawing and use that to bias how many stars we actually draw at a particular zoom level. You see, don't forget, we want to play the game at sort of this scale. So the stars in the background at this scale don't look too bad at all. Yes, that's what I was going to say, Ericsson. You've just got up there. What about varying the amount of stars per cell as well? Well, I think we should draw them based on how many sectors we've got. Because if we're zoomed out, we've got loads of sectors. So we actually want to draw sort of inverse the number of sectors that we've actually got. So let's try that. Int n sectors in total is going to be our v sectors dot x times v sectors dot y. So that's our total number of sectors, and we could use that to bias our count. Now we have to think about the scaling here. This may require some magic numbers to sort of make work. But as we've got a lower number of sectors, we want a larger number of stars. Have you added the Tesla floating in between Mars? You know, there's only Elon Musk can get away with deliberately littering space. You know, everybody else is sort of really against the littering of space, but he can just go and throw a knackered old car up there, and everybody's happy. Right, so I want something that's inversely proportional to the number of sectors. I'm guessing there's probably a square root in there as well. I'm waiting for Ericsson to sort of throw some maths here, but we'll see. Ah, hey, Twister is here. Very good. Well, I've got a bit of a plan for sort of brightness, which we might be able to try today as well. But let's get on with implementing the star count first. So I could just do something like x divided by n sectors. So let's start with that first. Int n max stars equals, so we know that the max stars in a given cell is going to be, I don't know, let's pick 100 divided by n sectors. The problem is when we get close enough, we're going to do these as floats, actually, just so we make sure we get every sort of bit of resolution out of it. What's going to happen here is, so when we're zoomed out, we've got loads and loads of sectors. We're going to get very few stars. When we've got a handful of sectors on the screen, we're going to get... have I got that the right way around? So we're zoomed out, we're going to have loads of sectors. We get few stars per sector. As we're zoomed in, this sector's number is getting larger, which means the number of stars drawn... No, so it's getting smaller. Yes, so that's the right way around. Okay, so now we'll have n max stars here, and we'll just see it. We'll just see what happens. Oh, got some new people. Hang on. YMG Able. Oh, hang on. YMG Able, good evening, guys. Jerry, thanks for all your content. No problem at all. Thank you for dropping by. The Chazeg. That's my one good idea. Hang on, I've missed the idea. Let me zoom back up. Vary the brightness, then don't draw the darker ones as you zoom out. Okay, well I think we will play with the brightness a little bit. The number of stars should stay constant. Well, the problem is we take a rendering performance hit, because if we zoom out, we've got to then generate and draw loads of stars. Like lots and lots of stars. Let's see how this works. We'll run this, see if we've got our numbers anything like sensible. I mean, it's discouraging that right now I can't see any stars. So we know that 100. So we've got sort of a narrow window there where we did have some stars. Now let's play with the number a little bit. Could be that we need this to be a really big number. Let's take a look. Okay, I need the planet as sort of a reference for scale here. So in principle, if I pick a particular star, that one there, and I zoom out, when I zoom back in, that star is still there. So maybe that's what we want to fade in. I guess we need to actually display some numbers on the screen for when we're at these kind of scales. $1100 frames per second needs to be preserved at all times, does it? I think right now the biggest consumer of FPS is drawing this circle. So we may need to look at what we're doing with this number. I think this is too primitive. It's going to be too difficult to tune, because if I just keep making this larger, yes, we can see more as we're zoomed out, but then I think we end up with a situation when we zoom in, that we've just got, yes, far too many stars sort of bursting into life. I'm getting artifacts and things are starting to appear just because of the the random number generation. So that's probably not good enough. Introduce a frame rate cap of 60 frames per second. Well, that's easy enough. We just put true. Not here, but the next one. It'll actually be 50 frames per second on my monitor. Right, so that's clearly broken our stars, right? The stars look rubbish. There's a good density of them, but far too many. Maybe a non-linear equation will work better. I think that's necessary because the sector's size is squaring, isn't it? So that is increasing non-linearly as we zoom out. So maybe if we take, I don't know, let's just hack in. We're hacking in stuff now, and that's really what this is all about. We'll take the square root of that. Wow, okay, well certainly at that zoom level we've got lots and lots of stars. Well, that's actually worked a little bit better. I think. Or has it not changed anything at all? Might just be that we have far too many stars now. I think we had far too many. Let's change that to 100. So this is what I don't want the stream to become. It's just me fine-tuning numbers. I can do that off-stream to make things look about right. Now, yes, stars sort of, because my zoom isn't necessarily smooth, you can't really follow sort of stars popping in and out very easily. So it looks I mean, you can see patterns. So where my mouse cursor is here, I've got these two stars close together, and as I zoom in, they remain there until I get to a certain point where I obviously decide to stop drawing the number of stars. Yeah, it's kind of the wrong way round this. I wanted to draw more stars as we're zoomed in. The stars are too small. Well, the stars are infinitely far away. They're not going to get bigger than individual dots. Stars are not uniformly distributed in space. They're gathered in galaxies. Yep. But that doesn't look very interesting in a computer game. You're absolutely right, but it's not very visually pleasing. And we're using the stars as a reference point for movement as well. Digitas. Loved your containers video. Oh, thank you very much. Should use blue noise. Hidden asbestos. The Sloan Great Wall is a cosmic structure formed by a giant well of galaxies. Does each sector start a new random seed for its own stars? Yes, it does. So that's we've taken that straight from the procedurally generated video. So each sector we can get this integer seed for, and that bit's working, right? So the stars are consistent. We just need to work out an interesting way of calibrating the star density based on zoom level. Because if we do just leave this at a fixed number, what did we have it at? We did have it originally as a fixed number. 10. Oh dear. 10. The problem we've got is when we're zoomed right out, it's just too dense. We need to somehow correlate that number of stars with our zoom. Press tab there. There we go. So it's obviously far too many. But looks about right whilst we've zoomed in. So you think 1 over zoom level? Yes, so yeah, Phil, it does, yeah. So it means we don't ever have to generate or store the stars anywhere. We get exactly the same pattern of stars in space without ever needing to store that information or generate them in advance. Now, we could bias the random number generation slightly to give us a more global distribution. Like we could look how far away each star is in principle from the center of the universe, and then use that to bias, maybe get a Milky Way-like effect, that sort of thing. Lower zoom level is zoomed in, right? I don't know. That's a good point. Let's display some information. Maybe that's where we're going wrong. So let's draw on our screen, draw string, and we will draw, what should we draw? Zoom. Zoom is equal to, ooh, I have to think, how do I get the zoom? That is tv.get world scale, I'm going to guess. I think it's get world scale. We can just dot str. And we'll draw that at 0, not quite 0, 0. I think we'll draw that at 10, 10 in the top corner. Now, because our screen's going to be all sorts of different colours, I'm going to just choose to draw that as red. That might not be super visible. I should probably scale this as well, which is the next one. So we'll just scale that up. 3. Right, so this is at zoom level 1, so basically every pixel actually on screen right now is a full sector. And as we start to zoom in, you see, no, the world scale is getting larger. Yeah, displaying the numbers is a useful thing to do, isn't it? It gives you sort of an appreciation now for actually what's going on. Yeah, nmax stars equals zoom level. That's where we've gone wrong. So yeah, we have been sort of doing it backwards. Let's try int. And we'll pick tv.getWorldScale. Since we're scaling both proportionally, We can just do .x. Right, we still may need to play some games with that because, oh dear, fully zoomed out, we're still going to be drawing 1 star per sector, and that's probably not what we want to do. Yeah. Right. Let's find our planet. You see, I think we probably want to set it to now be the square root of that value, right? To try and reduce the density. That looks pretty nice, though. I will say, in high definition, that actually looks quite nice. Yeah, you want proportional to area, not linear dimension. Well, I'm going to throw square root in here and see what happens. Yeah, I think that's sort of on the whole reduced the number. It's not quite as dense. But the problem is when we've got these low numbers, there's so many cells drawn. Some of them we need to basically choose no stars to be drawn at all, I think. You want me to square it? Lower the star opacity based on zoom. I don't think that's the problem here isn't necessarily the opacity. The problem is how many stars we're drawing. So I'll tell you what, I'll actually get it to display how many what stars it's drawing at a particular zoom level, and we can go from there. So we'll add that to the next line down. We scaled it by 3, so that's basically 30 high. So if I set that to 40, stars per sector. N max stars. Oops, zoomed out. We're going to be careful not to zoom out any more than that. I think weird things will start to happen. I mean, that's somewhat predictable, right? So stars per sector is going up. The trouble is we've just got so many sectors on the screen at this scale that basically every pixel is a sector. Every time your zoom level goes by 2, your star count should go by 4. I think, Ericsson, you're solving a different problem, buddy. It's not a problem of zooming in and losing density. I'm happy with the density here. It's the problem is zooming out. Yeah, see, that's what I'm thinking, Standard In, is actually you probably want to now start to choose just not to render any stars at all for a given sector. At some distance, they should be removed from the image. Can you just make the sector size static rather than scale it when you zoom? No, because then as you start to pan around the image, the panning won't work. They won't remain consistent. You need to start picking which sectors have bright enough stars to show up when zoomed out. Well, perhaps the answer is we now pseudo-randomly generate the number of stars in the sector, and we can use that to sort of bias whether the sector gets drawn at all. We could sort of threshold that information. But let's have a look relative to our spacecraft. Now, if I press the F1 key, I can lock on, and I will just zoom into our craft and start flying. Got to be very careful here, because it's going to start flying very quickly. I want to slow the craft down a bit. I'm going to have to fix these craft mechanics, they're awful. I bet the Twitch compression is loving that. You're more focused on the overdensity. Yes, that's right, Ericsson. That's the problem we've got, is when we're zoomed out, we've got too many stars. Because basically every sector has at least one star, and that's what we're drawing. Random number of stars here, that's what I'm thinking. So maybe we have a second bias in here. So rather than just always picking 10 stars per sector, we actually draw that number from our random number generator. Biased, of course. Did I pull in the integer generation code? I don't think I did. Because I did actually create. Yeah, I'll just pull that in. Yeah, I'm having second thoughts about doing that. Might be worth hard coding the value to see what looks good. Yeah, I think that is probably the route to go down. Some of these things are just going to need a bit of tweaking and testing and experimentation. The reason I'm sort of reluctant to just now randomly generate the number of stars per sector is max stars is giving us sort of the right density at those more zoomed in levels. We would basically, even if we generated a random number of stars, we still need to somehow handcraft the minimum and maximum number of stars for a given zoom, even if we're randomly generating how many there are. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting problem. Good night, Kanawanagasaki Yoko. Ericsson, okay, always the source of information. Use the fractional value from your max stars number to select the probability that each sector should draw one additional star. Is the game supposed to be played at the zoomed in scale? Does it even matter? Well, it's a good question. It is a good question, and it's relevant because I think, realistically, if you're looking at the map sort of at this scale, you're looking at the whole galactic map, then, well, the background stars are just noise, right? You're not going to see them. So it's really only when you start getting to these sort of playable scales that you are going to see them. And as I've said many, many times so far, that realistically, we're going to play the game, on the whole, at sort of this level of zoomed in, right? I want it so that the planets feel huge. And when you're at this level, you can see now the stars sort of, as we're fading out of the corona of the sun there, the stars are sort of correct. They're doing the thing that they should be doing. So there's merit in sort of suggesting, well, if you're zoomed out, that's quite nice for a zoomed out view. Is there a point where we just say, well, hang on, there's no stars to render? Or we pick at a particular zoom level at a different kind of density, so it's really just picking one or two different stars out. I think that's probably the solution. Maybe that's something to do offline, though, because it's not very interesting hacking those numbers. Take a page out of your universe generator. Use the XY of the sector to choose if the sector renders, then use the XY of the sector as the base seed for that stars. Now, the problem you'd have there is you'd get to a point where you'd start to see a checkerboard because we've immediately isolated whether or not we see that particular sector generating any stars. So it will look good really zoomed out, but it's sort of in that mid-range level would start to look pretty bad. What are we doing? It's a good question. Hello, by the way. So anyway, I think what I've hit upon here is that yes, it looks like procedurally generating stars is the way forward to generate sort of this nice, interesting background pattern for us. I've lost my planet. I had some keys to go quickly to planets. There we go. But actually fine-tuning these is proving to be a little bit tricky. Ooh, that's quite interesting. What's going on there? You can't see probably what I can see there, but it looks like there's 2 layers of stars. There isn't, but it looks like there is. I guess that's some sort of aliasing for the stars and the integer coordinates that they're being stuck with. Now you see that's very zoomed in, and it's probably not dense enough. You can see the stars twinkling. Yeah, probably you're right, LSG Dave. I think it is a bit like a map. The problem is people will sort of pick up on the fact that there would be a change fundamentally. So that's what I'm trying to do, is smooth out the change. And you can do that by, for each sector of space, by choosing to generate more stars. So some of the stars remain consistent all the time. Even when you're zoomed out, you could just continuously zoom in on that star and it will just exist there. Now we can probably see that. We have to get lucky and choose one. So if I zoom out enough, I'm going to put my mouse cursor just below, or just on a star. And hopefully, as I zoom in, it's that one. Yeah, that star remains. Right, so it's there all the way from zoomed out to zooming in. And I think that gives people sort of a feature to focus on. Now, it may be the case that as they're zooming in, new stars appear, but if they go from a zoomed out perspective and zoom in, at least then they'll be able to accurately say, well, hang on, yes, there's the thing I'm zooming in on. So there's this little cluster over here. That little cluster remains until we zoom in too far, I think. Yeah. This line of stars there. I might mess with some of this in a shader or something after the stream. Yeah, exactly. It is rather fun to think about doing it continuously. I don't think we've got around to we've not necessarily solved the problem, which is a bit of a pain. Maybe we're right. Maybe when we're zoomed out, we really do just need, like, basically no stars at all. So when we've got loads of sectors, sort of what would be our most sensible sector? So the maximum number of stars that we would have. Ah, is that the problem? Is the problem that I'm actually putting a fixed number of stars per sector anyway? Going round in circles. Maybe below zoom 16 you can set another function to generate the stars. Well, I do want them to sort of fade into other. Why don't you lower the opacity of the stars as someone suggested? Well, because at the moment we're using the sort of a CPU rendering to do it. So there'll be sort of an overhead, but it doesn't. The problem here isn't necessarily that the stars are too bright. It's just that there's too many of them when we're zoomed out. And it's about finding that balance between the zoom level and how many stars per sector we want to generate. Part of the problem is when we're zoomed out very far, our sectors are actually smaller than a pixel. So of course it's got to generate at least one star or not. And I think that might actually be the solution, is that we change our sector size from being 1, 1, which would then correspond to a whole pixel, into something much larger. And that's what I wanted to do sort of offline over the next few days, is altering this program to sort out the world scaling for everything, because I think we're going to end up running into precision issues if we're not already currently just using floating points. The size of the sectors is scaled with the zoom. You start with 1 star when the sector is 1 pixel. That's the problem, right? That's why it goes very, very bright. So here, we've got basically we're at this relative size of the sector is 1 pixel in my screen. So the zoom level is at 1. Stars per sector is 1. The fact that we're seeing some black dots is presumably, I don't know. I'm not quite sure why we're not sort of seeing just a fully white image there. But that's why we're seeing this. It's really too populated. We need a lot more sectors at this zoom level to say, well, I've got no visible stars. Yes, then you can change your probability stars per sector to probability for stars. If you draw the stars to a different layer, you can use the layer rendering hook to do all the star math on a per pixel basis. If you don't set the 1 star when zoom is 1 and let it to have 0 stars in some sectors, can we have a global maximum value of stars that can be displayed on the screen? Well, currently, yeah, I guess what we haven't got is the number of sectors displayed. So we've got that number there. We could display that as well. Let's throw that in, and maybe we'll start to see some of the relationships that we can tune. So, sectors. And I'll also put in then sort of the potential maximum number of stars, or the actual number of stars. Because that will be n sectors times n max stars in its current form. So as you can see right now, we've got basically 1 star per sector. So 2 stars per sector, we can see, yeah, approximately, well, the relationship will hold, right? So the number of sectors is decreasing significantly, and so is the overall number of stars. Maybe you're right. Maybe we need to re-engineer this in terms of we have a star budget, and that way at any particular zoom level you've only drawn X number of stars. It's just deciding which of those stars are the ones that you draw. Something's wrong. So what's happening here is there's a lot of different scales going on with the transformed view. It's not uncommon for pixels to be drawn on top of other pixels once they've gone through these floating point multipliers. It's really just sort of accumulation of floating point error you see there. But yes, you're right. At this stage, it should be pretty much white. And if we go really zoomed in, the whole screen is 1 sector. There's no stars at all. So I think for next week, we want to think about turning this into a star budget system, I think. And then using these sectors and somehow, yeah, maybe that's actually how to do it. As you can still see the sectors as we have been doing. But you take the number of sectors, you divide the maximum number of stars you want to see on the screen. Let's just have a think about that for a second. So if I set my max visible stars, if I come up with int n max visible stars at all times, I'm going to say that that's 10,000 stars. You've seen me on YouTube. It was about assembly. Oh, well, yep, sometimes I also do this silliness. In fact, every Tuesday afternoon at 8 o'clock. In fact, we're due to finish this, sadly, pretty soon, but I just want to see if this works before we do. So if we say that that's our star budget, and we then know approximately that our max stars is our star budget, max visible stars, divided by n sectors. I'm sure we had something similar to this before. Then, if we've got just a handful of sectors, we're going to have a lot more visible stars per sector. Let's just try that. So that's because now we've actually got more sectors visible on the screen than we have stars in our star budget. Stars per sector. It's interesting that that doesn't seem accurate. There's 2 sectors, but there's certainly not 10,000 dots on the screen there. That might need a bit of investigation. If I just draw in the sector again, just so we can just sort of verify that. Let's put the sector back in. Ah, okay, it's just because the individual sector has become so large at this point. Right, it's the actual sector is larger than the screen. Okay, right, so we just zoomed in too far. So that's actually working. So that's telling us now that we've got a fixed number of stars per sector. It's also, you know, it's consistent across the zoom level. So as I pan, you know, the patterns pan with me. If I zoom out and zoom back in, yeah, so that little pattern of stars remains. Seems weird that it would show you 2 sectors. Well, I guess if you get to the point where you're looking at a boundary, so I'm now looking at 3 sectors, so if I zoom in enough, yeah, so I've got 2 sectors visible on the screen at any one time. Ah, but that's an interesting little bug there. So now, because it's actually seeing 2 sectors, we can see that it is changing the stars. Lots of interesting things to think about, and no doubt loads of discussion is going to happen on the Discord server about how to actually handle this problem. I think we can all agree that the star generation technique is pretty cool. But sorting out these density issues is going to require some thought. I think by the next episode, I might have played with this a little bit offline, so we don't have to sit through all of this again in another episode. And I'll also start to refactor the code a bit, but I'll walk us through it when we start. Yeah, Ericsson, you must have like a 20-minute delay or something like that. We're not projecting a 3-dimensional universe. It's still definitely a 2-dimensional universe, but it's just it's a graphical aesthetic that we're trying to solve. So we want it to look pleasant and look like it's richly populated and detailed, as if somebody has handcrafted every single star in this universe. If I go and find my planet, where's my planet? Zoom in. There we go. Something nice to finish on. Lots of love from Istanbul. I visited Istanbul and I loved it. I thought it was a great place. That was back in 2006. When at zoom level 1, your sector should be bigger than that 1x1 pixel. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's part of the solution, is that we need to implement a sector size that isn't just related to 1x1. idea. Half the square root of zoom level and make it possible for sectors to contain 0 or 0 stars below zoom level 4. You think sort of a nice hard threshold like that is not going to be noticeable? I think it might be. I think it would be nicer to solve this with a continuous function rather than just doing it discretely. But as Saladin has pointed out and as Danderstein has pointed out, is that entirely necessary? Because what zoom levels are we going to be playing the game at? I don't know. We haven't got that far. We haven't thought about it. And these are questions to think about amongst ourselves and on the Discord server, I guess. Right, well, we have reached the end of this week's show. That's gone too quickly, and it's definitely been a lot about stars and procedural random number. They are twinkling a bit now because the sector count is changing. We'll have to have a think about this. It needs a bit more thought. But I wish to thank you all for watching, and I've got nobody to pass you on to. Nobody ever says, hey, by the way, when you finish your stream, could you pass on your audience? It just doesn't happen. So take care, everybody, and I will be on the Discord server for a chat for a little bit, and I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.